To make me lose interest in him, Derek had me deliver a box of Duracell to his apartment on a night with a raging blizzard. The box was wrapped in a brown paper drugstore bag, making me assume he was sick. I was in such a frantic rush to get to him that I slipped and took a hard fall on the icy road. But when the door opened and I saw the warm, intimate glow of the apartment behind him, everything became painfully clear. From that night on, I began to slip out of his life. He injured his knee during a major basketball game. His roommate tracked me down in the hallway. Derek took a really bad fall. Grace, are you going to go see him? I shook my head. Even when he got into a serious car accident a few weeks later, I didn't step foot in the hospital. When the winter break arrived, and he asked to drive home together, I manufactured excuses to stay behind. I still have exams to study for. But then he ran into me on the street, while I was walking hand in hand with my boyfriend. His eyes narrowed, a cold, sharp edge cutting through his voice. I thought you were in the middle of exams. Grace. And since when are you dating? Why didn't I know about this? I used to be a permanent fixture at every single one of Derek's basketball games. He was Columbia's star computer science major, notorious for being untouchable. Most of the university's sports clubs had to drag students in by their ID numbers to fill the rosters, but the basketball team never had that problem. Whenever Derek was on the court, the bleachers were packed to the rafters. He was the campus's ice prince, completely aloof and detached. During his first 2 years, he hadn't dated a single person, leaving everyone to whisper about who would finally be the one to melt his frozen heart. I was the only girl allowed within his inner circle. After a game, he would casually toss his sweat-dampened team jacket over my head, pull my hair, and offer a lazy, murmured, "I'm heading to the showers." The other girls would watch us with intense envy, and I quietly let myself drown in the sweet, dizzying warmth of that ambiguity. I was naive enough to believe his refusal to date anyone else was because he was waiting for me. Until that snowy night when he chose a different way to reject me. A way far more cruel than a simple face-to-face. No. He wanted to humiliate me, to make me feel like a pathetic clown. Since that night, I had stopped reaching out to him. I stopped attending his games, choosing to spend my Saturdays tucked away in the quiet corners of the library instead. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, my phone buzzed. It was Zach, Derek's roommate. "Hey, Grace." Derek took a nasty spill on the court. "Are you coming over to check on him?" Hearing that he was hurt still sent a sharp, involuntary pang through my chest. But I had my pride, and I had my dignity. "I'm not on campus today, Zach. I won't be able to make it." Zach let out a quiet sigh of surprise. "No wonder you weren't in the stands today. He kept looking for you." I offered a quiet murmur of agreement and hung up. Leaving the library, I grabbed a lonely dinner at the dining hall and immediately returned to my books. Derek and I had entered a silent, unspoken truce. We hadn't exchanged a single message in over 2 weeks. In truth, I had always been the one driving our connection. The moment I stopped reaching out, our world simply fell apart. Besides, he had a girlfriend now. It was only right that we stopped speaking. The night of the blizzard, Derek had texted me asking me to deliver a package to his apartment. Earlier that morning, I had finally mustered the courage to slip a handwritten confession letter into his locker. He hadn't acknowledged it all day. It wasn't until the snow began to pile up on the pavement that he finally sent a message, telling me he had left a bag with Zach for me to bring to his place. By the time I ran to his building, my breath was coming in ragged gasps. Derek stood in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame. "Thanks," he murmured, reaching for the bag. My fingers were so stiff from the biting cold that my grip slipped. The paper bag tore, and its contents spilled across the welcome mat. I looked down. It wasn't cold medicine. It was a sleek blue box of condoms. I froze, the breath catching in my throat. Derek crouched down, his expression entirely natural, as he gathered the items. We locked eyes for a long, quiet second. My gaze drifted past his shoulder, peering into the warm, dimly lit apartment behind him. A girl, slender silhouette, was visible in the soft glow of the hallway. She was wrapped in his sheets, her bare shoulders pale against the dark fabric. The air in the room felt thick with a lazy, post-coital warmth. A heavy, suffocating pressure settled over my chest, and my entire world seemed to crumble into dust. Freezing wind howling outside was nothing compared to the absolute numbness spreading through my veins. Then the girl's soft, sleepy voice drifted out to the doorway. "Derek, are you coming back to bed?" Derek looked back at me, a faint, polite smile playing on his lips. "My girlfriend is waiting, Grace." I won't keep you. It's freezing out there, so be careful on your way back. I didn't even have the strength to ask him when he had started seeing her, or why he hadn't told me. The heavy door clicked shut in my face. The moment the elevator doors closed on the first floor, I collapsed against the wall and began to sob. The bag had been a standard brown paper drugstore bag, which was why I had desperately assumed he was sick. I had run so fast through the storm that I had taken a hard fall on the black ice, scraping my knee so badly it was still throbbing. As I stumbled out into the freezing night, my phone rang. Derek's name flashed on the screen. Grace. His voice came through, cool and detached. Wait in the lobby. I told Kevin to come pick you up. I didn't dare speak, terrified that the tremble in my voice would betray my tears. I simply let out a quiet murmur of assent and hung up. I had no intention of waiting at this hour. The subways were delayed, the buses had stopped running, and finding a cab in a blizzard was practically impossible. But I kept my head down, burying my face in my jacket as I began the long, freezing walk back to my dorm. The profound, aching weight in my chest made me entirely numb to the cold. If a pair of strong, steady hands hadn't caught my shoulders, I probably would have collapsed in the snow. Without even realizing it, a tall, dark silhouette stepped into my path, shielding me from the biting wind. The pale street lamp illuminated his sharp, striking features, and the snow dusted across his dark hair. Grace, my mind scrambled to place him. Kevin Pierce. He was Derek's former roommate from freshman year. We had met briefly at a campus party, and though we hadn't spoken much, his quiet, intense presence had left a lasting impression on me. He was exceptionally handsome, though far more reserved and aloof than Derek. I whispered, my eyelashes heavy with frost. He nodded, his dark eyes searching my face. Didn't I tell you to wait for me in the lobby? Despite the freezing temperatures, a light sheen of sweat clung to his forehead. His chest was heaving slightly, his breath curling into white plumes. In the dark, he didn't sound angry or demanding. He simply sounded relieved to have found me. Where were you planning to go? I asked softly. I realized with a jolt that the dorms had already locked for the night. There was no way back inside. I suppose I'll find a hotel, I murmured. Kevin's lips twitched with a faint, dry amusement. The blizzard has shut down the transit lines. Every hotel in the area is booked solid or charging triple. Come to my place. In the hesitation in my eyes, he glanced down at his watch. It's past midnight, Grace. I have an early morning flight to catch, to go visit my family for the weekend. Once I drop you off at my apartment, I'm heading straight to the airport. You'll have the place to yourself. It's much safer than wandering the streets in a storm. I looked at his sincere, calm expression and nodded. Okay. Thank you, Kevin. A fleeting smile touched his lips, so brief I almost thought I had imagined it. You're freezing, he muttered, quickly, unbuttoning his heavy wool coat and wrapping it around my shoulders. He unwound his thick scarf and wrapped it gently around my neck, his fingers brushing my chin. When we reached his apartment, he set his suitcase by the door and looked down at my torn jeans. You fell? How did you know? I asked, startled. Kevin retrieved a small medical kit from the bathroom and placed it in my hands. Can you apply the ointment yourself? I nodded. He grabbed his suitcase, offering a quiet nod before heading out into the storm. Lock the door behind me. Grace, text me when you're back in your dorm tomorrow. I watched him leave, feeling a strange, quiet warmth bloom in my chest for the first time all night. Though Derek had never formally replied to my letter, his actions had given me an unmistakable answer. He didn't love me, and so I quietly stepped back, erecting a polite, impenetrable wall between us. When I walked into my dorm room, my roommates immediately swarmed around my desk. Grace, did Derek actually get a girlfriend? I paused, placing my books on the shelf, and nodded yes. Sophia sighed. I knew it. I ran into him downstairs earlier. He was dropping off Victoria Ashford, the law major. Jade joined in, her eyes wide. They look like something out of a magazine. It's almost unfair. That night, the campus forums were practically overflowing with threads about them. Heartbroken Columbia's golden boy is officially off the market. Honestly, they're perfect together. Both of them are gorgeous and wealthy. It's a visual masterpiece. Thank goodness. I was getting tired of seeing that plain girl, trailing behind him like a shadow. Derek was always out of her league anyway. My chest tightened slightly as I scrolled through the comments. I closed the app looking at my roommates. They really do make a lovely couple, I said quietly. And it was the truth. Everyone on campus thought so. Derek and I were childhood friends. Our families lived next door to each other in Greenwich, Connecticut. For years, it was just him and his mother. and we'd always assumed his father was out of the picture. But when we were in middle school, a sleek, black luxury sedan parked at the end of our street, drawing the curious gazes of all our neighbors. It turned out Derek's father was the CEO of Schott Enterprises, the most powerful developers on the East Coast. Derek's mother had refused to leave our quiet neighborhood, so his father simply bought the historic estate at the end of a lane and renovated it from top to bottom. Derek had always excelled at everything, easily outshining me in academics. I had barely scraped by to get into Columbia, while he had been accepted with honors. Now that we were of college age, my mother frequently brought him up during our weekly phone calls, dropping heavy hints. Derek's mother and I were just talking, Grace. It would be so lovely if you two ended up together. Back then, those words would make my cheeks burn with a shy, hopeful heat, but now, the mere mention of his name made me want to run in the opposite direction. I was sitting in the dining hall with Sophia when Derek's tall, unmistakable figure appeared near the entrance. He stood out effortlessly in the crowd, his broad shoulders easily clearing the students around him. Sophia nudged my arm, pointing toward the door. Grace, your boy is here. Hearing that old designation made my chest ache. Sophia, please don't say that. He has a girlfriend, and we aren't close anymore. Are you finished eating? Let's go. As we stood up to leave, Derek and Zach began walking in our direction. Derek's eyes locked onto mine, but I quickly averted my gaze, guiding Sophia toward the exit without looking back. It was the first time I had actively ignored him. That evening, I received a text from him. Have you been busy lately? I stared at the notification, waiting until midnight to type out a brief, formal reply. Yes, we have a lot of final projects this week. A few days later, our department hosted a guest lecture. Attendance was mandatory, and the seats were assigned by student ID. To my dismay, Derek was seated in the same row. As he walked down the aisle toward me, I quickly spotted an empty seat a few rows down, nestled between two strangers. I slid into it before he could reach me, letting out a quiet sigh of relief. Derek's eyes darkened as he watched me sit down. Once the lecture started, my phone buzzed in my lap. Why didn't you sit with me? There was an empty space. I typed back a simple lie. Oh, sorry I didn't see you. When the lecture ended, I slipped out through the side exit, before the crowd could block the aisles. Why did you run off? His next text arrived. I manufactured another excuse. My roommate forgot her student ID, and needed me to bring it to her exam room. An hour later, my phone rang again. It was Zach, his voice frantic. Grace, thank goodness you picked up. Are you in your dorm? Derek got into a bad car accident. He's at Columbia Presbyterian. My fingers tightened around my phone, a cold spike of panic shooting through my chest. But then I forced myself to breathe. I can't go, Zach. I have plans today. You should call Victoria. Zach let out a strange, dry laugh. Why on earth would I call her? I remembered my brief encounter with Victoria in the library courtyard. A few days prior, she had stopped me, offering a polite, razor-sharp smile. Grace, right? Derek's little childhood friend? I'll be honest with you. I absolutely despise the concept of a childhood best friend. When it comes to men, I'm sure you understand. Nobody wants their boyfriend to have a surrogate sister hovering around. I had offered a tight, forced smile and nodded in agreement. Zach, I said now, my voice steady. It's not appropriate for me to go call his girlfriend. I hung up. The next morning I was woken up by a call. I answered sleepily, my voice raspy. Hello, Grace. Derek's voice came through thick and exhausted. I'm in the hospital. Annoyed at having my sleep disrupted, I muttered. Then call a doctor. Derek. I'm not a physician. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. And in that quiet, I finally woke up, realizing exactly what I had just said. For years, my responses to Derek had been dictated by a frantic, almost pathetic eagerness to please. If he had called me at 3 in the morning saying he was cold, I would have run through a rainstorm to bring him a blanket. If he told me he was hungry, I would have spent my last dollar on his favorite takeout. But now, hearing his voice, thick, exhausted, and laced with the familiar assumption that I would drop everything to play the comforting shadow, only stirred a profound, empty exhaustion in my chest. On the other end of the line, Derek's breath hitched. Grace, he murmured, his voice stripped of its usual cool, untouchable armor. Are you serious? Right now? I am, I said, my voice steady, devoid of the nervous tremble that used to define our conversations. You have a roommate, Derek. You have a girlfriend. And you have a family. There is absolutely no reason for you to be calling me from a hospital bed. Please don't call this number again. Before he could answer, I pulled the phone away and tapped the red button. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, the silence of the dorm room wrapping around me like a shield. Outside, the morning sun was rising, casting pale, frosty light across my desk. For the first time in my life, the realization that Derek was hurt didn't send me into a spiraling panic. My heart beat at a calm, rhythmic pace. The heavy iron chains of my childhood crush had finally completely shattered. Over the next few days, the campus was abuzz with news of Derek's accident. In the dining hall at the library and even in the lecture hall, students whispered about the golden boy's misfortune. Apparently, his sleek sports car had black iced on a sharp turn near the edge of campus. The vehicle was totaled, but Derek had escaped with only minor concussions and a severely bruised ribs. I heard Victoria has been by his side the entire time, Sophia whispered to me. As we walked through the snowy courtyard toward our computer science seminar, she practically moved into his hospital room. People are saying her family even pulled some strings to get him a private suite. That's nice, I replied quietly, pulling my scarf tighter around my neck. Sophia glanced at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Grace, are you really not going to see him? You two have been joined at the hip since freshman year. Everyone's noticed that you haven't even stepped foot near the clinic. We aren't close anymore, Sophia. I told you, I said, offering her a faint, reassuring smile. Besides, like you said, he has Victoria. He doesn't need me hovering around. She let out a soft sigh. I guess you're right. It's just strange. It feels like the end of an era. It was the end of an era, but only for me. For Derek, it was likely just a minor adjustment. He was a king accustomed to his throne, and I had simply been the loyal subject who finally decided to leave the court. That afternoon, as I was leaving the science building, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out, expecting another frantic text from Zach, but the name on the screen made my heart skip a beat. Kevin Pierce. My mind instantly flashed back to the night of the blizzard, the heavy, warm wool coat he had wrapped around my freezing shoulders, the gentle touch of his fingers as he wound his scarf around my neck, and the quiet safety of his apartment. I had texted him the next day as promised, letting him know I had returned to my dorm safely. He had replied with a simple, "Good. Take care of your knee." We hadn't spoken since. I slid the bar to answer. "Hello, Grace." His deep, resonant voice came through the receiver, carrying a quiet warmth that contrasted sharply with the freezing winter air. "Are you on campus?" "Yes, I just finished my afternoon lab. I'm walking past the library." "Turn around," he said. I paused, turning on my heel. Standing near the stone archway of the library was Kevin. He was dressed in a dark, tailored overcoat, his hands tucked casually into his pockets. The pale winter sunlight caught the sharp angles of his jaw and the dark, thick waves of his hair. He looked like an oil painting, striking, reserved, and entirely out of place among the bustling, stressed-out college students. He lowered his phone, a faint, barely perceptible smile touching the corners of his lips as he walked toward me. "Kevin," I breathed, my breath curling into a white plume. "I thought you were still visiting family." "I got back this morning," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. His dark eyes searched my face, scanning for any sign of distress before drifting down to my legs. "How is your knee?" "It's much better. The ointment you gave me worked wonders," I said, feeling a sudden, shy warmth bloom in my cheeks. "I still have your coat and scarf in my dorm. I had them dry cleaned. I was planning to ask Zach how to get them back to you." "There's no rush," he said quietly. "Are you free for a warm drink? There's a quiet cafe 2 blocks down." I looked at him, searching his calm, sincere expression. Unlike Derek, whose presence always demanded attention and filled me with a constant, anxious need to please, Kevin's presence felt like a quiet sanctuary. He didn't demand anything from me. "I'd like that," I said. The cafe was small, tucked away in a basement storefront, smelling of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon. We sat at a small wooden table in the corner, far away from the chatter of other students. Kevin ordered a black coffee, while I held a cup of hot chocolate, letting the warmth seep into my frozen fingers. "I heard about Derek's accident," Kevin said after a moment, his tone casual, though his eyes remained fixed on me. "Yes, everyone is talking about it," I replied, tracing the rim of my cup. "I didn't go see him." Kevin didn't look surprised. He simply nodded, taking a slow sip of his coffee. "Good. I raised my eyes, startled by his bluntness. Good. You've spent a long time running after someone who only looked at you when he needed an audience, Grace, Kevin said, his voice quiet but incredibly firm. You deserve to be someone's first choice, not a convenient shadow. The words hit me like a physical wave, knocking the breath from my lungs. Nobody had ever said that to me before. Everyone, my roommates, my mother, our neighbors in Greenwich, had always spoken of my relationship with Derek as if I were the lucky one, the ordinary girl who was privileged enough to be tolerated by the campus star. My throat tightened, and I had to look down at my cup to blink away the sudden threat of tears. I was stupid, I whispered. I thought because we grew up together, because he didn't let anyone else close, that I was special to him. You were special to him, Kevin corrected gently, but in a selfish way. He liked the security of your devotion without having to offer anything in return. And when he realized you wanted more, he chose the most cowardly way to push you away. I looked at Kevin, my heart pounding. How did you know about the night of the blizzard? Zach told me Derek had asked you to bring him a package, Kevin said, his eyes darkening slightly with a flash of cold anger. And when I saw you walking in that storm, looking like your entire world had just collapsed, it wasn't hard to piece together what happened. Derek has always been arrogant, but what he did that night was unforgivable. He reached across the table, his hand resting near mine. He didn't touch me, giving me the space to retreat if I wanted to, but the mere proximity of his hand felt like a steady, solid anchor. You don't have to feel guilty for walking away, Grace, Kevin said softly. You're finally free. A soft, genuine smile broke across my face, the heavy weight that had settled in my chest since that snowy night finally beginning to lift. Thank you, Kevin. Derek returned to campus 2 weeks later. His sports car was gone, replaced by a sleek, black SUV driven by a private chauffeur, a testament to his family's immense wealth. He walked with a slight limp, his ribs still healing, but his chin was held high, his expression as cold and untouchable as ever. Victoria was often seen walking beside him, her hand slipped elegantly through his arm, looking every bit the high society couple they were expected to be. But to those who knew him, something was off. He's playing like a madman, Zach complained to me one afternoon. I had been sitting in the quiet, glass-walled study area of the library, trying to finish a complex coding assignment, when Zach practically collapsed into the chair opposite mine. He looked exhausted, bags hanging heavy under his eyes. Who? I asked, not looking up from my laptop. Derek, Zach groaned, rubbing his temples. Ever since he got cleared to play again, he's been driving himself into the ground. He's angry, Grace. He's snapping at the coach, he's ignoring his teammates, and he's treating Victoria like she's a nuisance. Yesterday, she tried to bring him a sports drink during practice, and he literally swatted it out of her hand and told her to get out. I kept my fingers moving across the keyboard. If X greater than Y, return true. He's probably just stressed from the accident and missed schoolwork. No, it's not that, Zach said, leaning forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. He's looking for you, Grace. Every time we walk into the dining hall, his eyes scan the room. During games, he looks at your usual spot in the bleachers. The first game back, when he realized you weren't there, he played so aggressively, he almost got ejected. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keys. The memory of the cold, sharp edge in Derek's voice when he had text confronted me about avoiding him flashed through my mind. He has a girlfriend, Zach, I said quietly, finally looking up. And I have my own life. I can't keep being his emotional safety net. I know, Zach sighed, looking guilty. I shouldn't be bringing this to you. It's just the apartment is a nightmare right now. He barely sleeps. He just sits on the balcony in the freezing cold, staring at his phone. He won't admit it, but he's losing his mind because you're not there. Then he'll have to find a way to get over it, I said, closing my laptop. I have to go to class, Zach. I packed my things and walked out of the library, refusing to let Zach's words sway me. The old Grace would have broken down, filled with pity and love, and run to Derek's apartment to cook him a warm meal and tell him everything would be okay. But that Grace had frozen to death on the black ice of his welcome mat. As fate would have it, the universe seemed determined to test my resolve. On Saturday, the basketball team had a major rivalry game against Yale. The campus was electric, and my roommates practically dragged me out of our dorm to join the tailgating festivities. I managed to slip away from them, preferring to spend my afternoon tucked away in the quiet, empty computer lab in the basement of the engineering building. As the hours passed, the distant, muffled roars of the crowd from the campus arena drifted through the high, narrow windows of the lab. I worked in peace, losing myself in the elegant logic of my algorithms. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was Zach. I stared at the screen, a familiar, involuntary pang of anxiety tightening my chest. I took a deep breath, steeling myself, and picked up. "Hey, Zach." "Grace." "Thank God." Zach's voice was frantic, accompanied by the chaotic, echoing noise of a crowded gymnasium. "Derek just took a really bad fall. He went up for a rebound and landed horribly on his knee. The medics are on the court right now." "It looks bad, Grace. Really bad." My heart gave a quiet, dull thud, but the panic that usually accompanied such news didn't come. I felt a strange, detached sorrow for him, the way one might feel for a stranger on the news. "Is he being taken to the hospital?" I asked calmly. "Yes, they're loading him onto a stretcher now," Zach panted, his voice trembling. "Grace, he was screaming your name when he fell. Not Victoria's. Yours. Are you going to go see him?" "Please, she's trying to get into the ambulance with him, but he's refusing to let her in. He wants you." I closed my eyes, leaning my forehead against the cool edge of the computer desk. I remembered the night of the blizzard, my own knee scraped and bleeding, the biting wind cutting through my thin jacket, while Derek stood in his warm apartment, telling me his girlfriend was waiting. He hadn't cared about my pain. Then. He hadn't cared if I made it back to my dorm safely. "No, Zach," I said, my voice steady and quiet. "I'm not going." "Grace, please. He's really hurt. He has Victoria," I interrupted gently. "She is his girlfriend. It is her place to be by his side, not mine. I have to study, Zach. Goodbye." I hung up before he could plead any further. I placed my phone face down on the desk, took a deep, shaky breath, and went back to my code. The winter break was rapidly approaching, and the campus was slowly emptying as students finished their final exams and headed home. Derek's knee injury had required surgery. Rumors said he would be out for the rest of the season, a devastating blow to his basketball career and his pride. Yet, despite his hospitalization, I didn't visit him once. I didn't send a text. I didn't even ask Zach for updates. I had completely, surgically excised him from my daily routine. Instead, my days were filled with quiet study sessions, warm drinks, and the steady, comforting presence of Kevin. We didn't label what we were doing, but a beautiful, unspoken understanding had blossomed between us. Kevin would wait for me outside my late-night labs, holding a hot thermos of tea. We would walk through the snow-covered campus, talking about everything and nothing, our favorite childhood books, our academic frustrations, and our dreams for the future. I learned that Kevin was a senior, majoring in financial engineering, that he had a dry, wicked sense of humor beneath his stoic exterior, and that he loved classical music but secretly listened to old-school rock when he was coding. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke with a deafening clarity. One evening, as we were walking back to my dorm, a sudden gust of wind blew my hood back, exposing my ears to the freezing air. Without a word, Kevin stopped, stepped in front of me to block the wind, and gently pulled my hood back up, tucking my stray hairs behind my ears. His fingers were warm against my cold skin, and his dark eyes held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You need to take care of yourself, Grace," he murmured, his voice low and incredibly gentle. "I have you to do that for me." The words slipped out of my mouth before I could stop them. My cheeks burned instantly, and I looked down, suddenly terrified. I had crossed a line. A low, soft chuckle vibrated in Kevin's chest. He reached down, his gloved hand gently cupping my chin, lifting my face, so I had to look at him. "Yes, you do," he said, his gaze steady and unwavering. "And I have no intention of stopping." My heart did a strange, joyful flutter, a feeling entirely different from the anxious, desperate longing I used to feel for Derek. This was a warm, settling happiness, a feeling of being valued, protected, and truly seen. The next day, as I was walking through the university courtyard to catch a bus to the train station, a familiar voice called out my name. "Grace." I froze. Standing near the stone steps of the student union was Derek. He was leaning heavily on a pair of crutches, his right leg encased in a bulky black brace. He looked thinner, the sharp lines of his face even more pronounced, and his dark Eyes were hollowed out by exhaustion. I took a deep breath, composed my face into a polite, neutral mask and turned to face him. Derek. Hello. He flinched slightly at my formal tone. He swallowed hard, his knuckles white as. He gripped his crutches. You didn't come to the hospital either time. I was busy with finals, I said, keeping my voice light and indifferent. And, as I told Zach, it wouldn't have been appropriate. You have Victoria. Victoria and I are over, Derek said quickly, his voice desperate, a raw edge, cutting through his usual composure. I broke it off. It was a mistake, Grace. The whole thing was a mistake. I never wanted her. I looked at him, feeling a sudden, profound sense of pity, not because he was hurt, but because he still didn't understand. That's between you and her, Derek, I said quietly. It has nothing to do with me. How can you say that? He stepped forward, almost losing his balance on his crutches before stabilizing himself. His eyes were wide, filled with a frantic, pleading light. We've been together our entire lives, Grace. Our families, our mothers, everyone expects us to be together. I made a mistake. I was stupid and I wanted to push you away because things were getting too real. And my father was putting pressure on me, but… Derek, I interrupted, my voice dropping to a calm, steady whisper. Do you remember the night of the blizzard? He froze, his mouth hanging slightly open, his face draining of what little color it had. I ran through a raging storm because I thought you were sick, I said, the memory no longer hurting, but serving as a cold, hard reminder of why I was standing here. I fell on the black ice. My knee was bleeding. And when I reached your door, you had me deliver condoms so you could go back to bed with another girl. You let me walk back in a blizzard, alone, while you closed the door in my face. Grace, I didn't know you fell, he whispered, his voice trembling violently. I swear I didn't know. If I had known, I would have. It shouldn't have mattered if I fell or not, Derek, I said, a sad smile touching my lips. The fact that you were willing to humiliate me like that, to use my care for you as a tool to mock me, that was the moment I realized who you really were. You didn't just push me away. You destroyed whatever respect I had for you. I can make it up to you, he pleaded, a tear finally escaping his eye and rolling down his pale cheek. Please, Grace. Just drive home to Greenwich with me for winter break. We can talk. We can fix this. Our parents are waiting for us. Please. I'm not driving home with you, Derek, I said, taking a step back. I've already bought my train ticket, and I have exams to study for. Grace. Before he could say another word, a tall, commanding figure stepped into the space between us. Kevin had appeared seemingly out of nowhere, his broad shoulders completely shielding me from Derek's desperate gaze. He looked down at Derek, his dark eyes cold and unyielding, a dangerous, quiet authority radiating from him. She said no, Derek, Kevin said, his voice low and warning. Leave her alone. Derek's eyes narrowed, his grief instantly transforming into a spark of defensive anger. Pierce, what the hell are you doing here? This is between me and Grace. Get the hell out of our way. It is between you and her, Kevin agreed, his tone deceptively calm. And she has already given you her answer. Now walk away before your other knee gets injured. The silent, heavy tension between the two men was suffocating. Derek stared at Kevin, his teeth clenched, but he knew he was in no position to fight, physically or otherwise. He looked past Kevin's shoulder, trying to catch my eye one last time. Grace, he whispered, his voice cracking. Please. I didn't look at him. I reached out, my hand slipping naturally into Kevin's. Kevin's fingers instantly wrapped around mine, warm, strong, and protective. I looked up at him and nodded. Let's go, Kevin. We turned and walked away, leaving Derek standing alone on his crutches in the falling snow, his pale face reflecting the absolute, crushing realization of what he had so carelessly thrown away. The winter break arrived, but the drama of the campus did not stay behind in New York. I had returned to Greenwich by train, seeking the quiet comfort of my childhood home. But Greenwich was a small, wealthy enclave where gossip traveled faster than the wind. Within 2 days of my arrival, my mother was already hovering around me, her face filled with anxiety. Grace, sweetie, she said one afternoon as we were preparing tea in our kitchen. Derek's mother called me yesterday. She said Derek came home in a Terrible state. He won't leave his room, he's barely eating, and his knee is in terrible shape. She asked me if something happened between you two. I poured the hot water into the teapot, my hands perfectly steady. We had a disagreement, Mom. We're just not close anymore. But Grace, my mother sighed, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. You two have always been destined for each other. His father's company is so powerful now, and Derek has always been so fond of you. It would be such a shame to throw away years of friendship over a silly college argument. It wasn't a silly argument, Mom, I said, turning to look her in the eye. I had decided I was done protecting Derek's reputation. During a blizzard, Derek had me deliver a box of condoms to his apartment while he was in bed with another girl. He let me walk home alone in a freezing storm after I took a hard fall on the ice. My mother froze, her eyes widening in absolute shock. The gentle matchmaking smile vanished from her face, replaced by a pale, horrified expression. He did what? He wanted to humiliate me so I would stop liking him, I said quietly. So I stopped. I don't want anything to do with him, Mom. And I would appreciate it if you didn't bring his name up to me again. My mother stood in silence for a long moment, her chest heaving with a mixture of shock and maternal outrage. For years, she had seen Derek as the perfect gentleman, the successful, handsome boy next door. Hearing the raw truth of his cruelty shattered that illusion instantly. I had no idea, she whispered, her voice trembling. She reached out, pulling me into a tight, fierce hug. Oh, my darling. I'm so sorry. I will never ever mention him to you again. I'll speak to his mother. They have no right to expect anything from you. Thank you, Mom, I murmured, burying my face in her shoulder, feeling a deep, healing wave of relief wash over me. 2 days later, I was walking down the historic, snow-dusted main street of Greenwich. I had agreed to meet Kevin, who had driven down from his family's estate in upstate New York just to see me. The air was crisp and cold, but my heart was light when I spotted Kevin, standing near a red brick bookstore, dressed in a long charcoal coat. A soft smile immediately broke across my face. He saw me, his dark eyes instantly softening, and he walked toward me with long, confident strides. You look beautiful, Grace, he said, reaching out to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear before sliding his hand into mine. You drove 3 hours just to walk down a snowy street with me? I teased, looking up at him. I drive 10, he said, his voice entirely serious, making my heart skip a beat. We walked hand in hand, the silence between us comfortable and warm. But our peace was abruptly shattered. Grace. We stopped, standing a few yards away, having just stepped out of a high-end cafe, was Derek. He was dressed in a thick designer coat, still relying on a single crutch to walk. His eyes were wide, fixed on our joined hands. A cold, sharp edge of shock and fury cut through his voice as he stared at us. I thought you were in the middle of exams, Grace, he said, his voice trembling. As he stepped closer, his eyes narrowing to slits. And since when are you dating? Why didn't I know about this? I felt a brief flicker of the old apprehension, but Kevin's grip on my hand tightened, offering me an unspoken, solid support. You didn't know because it's none of your business, Derek, I said, my voice cool and even. I don't owe you any explanations about my life. Pierce. Derek spat, looking at Kevin with pure, unadulterated venom. You're dating him? He was my roommate, Grace. He's a cold, arrogant bastard who doesn't care about anyone but himself. You're doing this just to hurt me, aren't you? That's enough. Kevin stepped forward, his tall frame completely eclipsing Derek. His voice was incredibly quiet, but it carried a deadly, razor-sharp edge that made even the furious Derek take half a step back. You have no right to speak to her like that. You lost the right to even say her name the night you left her in the snow. You don't know anything about that night, Derek roared, his face flushing with a mix of anger and deep, agonizing shame. I did it to protect her. My father, he was going to use her to get to me. He wanted me to marry Victoria to secure the Schott Enterprises merger, and if he knew I cared about Grace, he would have ruined her family. I had to make her hate me. I had to make her walk away so she would be safe. I stared at him, the sudden revelation landing like a heavy stone. So that was it. The grand, arrogant sacrifice of Derek Schott. He had believed himself to be a tragic hero in his own twisted drama, playing the villain to protect the fragile, helpless girl next door. He had assumed that once he was powerful enough, once he had secured his inheritance, he could simply walk back into my life, snap his fingers, and find me waiting exactly where he left me. I let out a soft, dry laugh, a sound filled with genuine amusement and pity. Derek looked at me, his eyes wide with a desperate hope. Grace, you understand now, right? I did it for you. Everything I did, even the condoms. I wanted to disgust you so you would stay far away from my father's reach. I love you, Grace. I've always loved you. You don't love me, Derek, I said, looking at him with absolute calm. You love your own drama, and you love the control you thought you had over me. His face paled, his eyes fracturing with panic. Grace, even if your father was a threat, you never respected me enough to treat me like an equal, I said, my voice clear and unwavering in the cold air. You didn't trust me, and you chose to humiliate and break me instead of standing by me. That isn't love, Derek. That's just cowardice. I looked up at Kevin, whose dark eyes were watching me with a profound, quiet pride. I smiled at him, my heart entirely whole, entirely healed. And besides, I added, looking back at Derek one last time, you don't need to worry about your father anymore, because I am with someone who would never, under any circumstances, use humiliation as a shield. Kevin would have stood in the storm with me. You chose to lock me out. Derek's crutch slipped slightly on the snow, his entire body trembling. He looked at our joined hands, then at the absolute indifference in my eyes. The realization that his tragic sacrifice had only succeeded in driving me into the arms of a man who actually knew how to cherish me was a blow far more devastating than any physical injury. Grace, please, he whispered, his voice cracking as he reached out a trembling hand. Don't leave me in the cold. You chose the cold, Derek, I said softly. Now you have to live in it. We turned our backs on him, walking away into the warm, bright afternoon. Behind us, the golden boy of Columbia stood alone on the icy street, his desperate cries fading into the quiet rustle of the winter wind. By the time the spring semester commenced, the dynamic on campus had shifted entirely. The story of Derek's dramatic confrontation in Greenwich had somehow leaked, and the whispers around the university were no longer about the ice prince and his tragic knee injury. Instead, the student body gossiped about how the untouchable computer science prodigy had been thoroughly rejected by the girl who used to be his shadow. To make matters worse for the Schott family, the highly anticipated merger between Schott Enterprises and the Ashford conglomerate collapsed. One evening, as Kevin and I were sitting in his apartment, the same apartment where he had sheltered me on the night of the blizzard, he slid a financial newspaper across the coffee table. Thought you might find this interesting, Kevin said, his voice laced with a quiet amusement. I looked at the headline. Schott Enterprises collapses after fraud investigation. CEO Arthur Schott under arrest. I read the article in silence. It turned out Derek's father had been desperate for the Ashford merger, not out of strength, but out of financial ruin. He had been running a massive offshore tax evasion scheme, and when the Ashfords discovered the depth of the fraud, they immediately pulled out, exposing the company to a federal investigation. So there was no grand sacrifice, I murmured, leaning back against Kevin's chest. He wrapped his strong arms around me, pulling me close. Derek's father was just a criminal trying to save his own skin, and Derek went along with it. Derek was too arrogant to see that his father was using him, Kevin said, his chin resting gently on my head. He thought he was playing a high-stakes chess game. In reality, he was just a pawn. But you, Grace, you were the only real thing in his life, and he threw you away for a house of cards. I turned in his arms, looking up into his beautiful, dark eyes. I'm glad he did. If he hadn't, I would have never realized what real warmth felt like. Kevin's eyes softened, a deep, intense devotion swirling in their depths. He leaned down, his lips meeting mine in a sweet, lingering kiss that tasted of hot tea and winter rain. It was a kiss that promised security, respect, and a lifetime of being cherished. As the weeks bled into months, the thick snows of winter slowly melted, giving way to the bright, blooming colors of a New York spring. I had stopped checking my phone for Derek's name. In fact, I had blocked his number entirely, along with Victoria's and Zach's. The ties to my past had been cleanly, surgically severed, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly living my own life. My grades had skyrocketed, My professors were praising my coding projects, and I had secured a prestigious summer internship at a major software development firm in Manhattan. Derek, on the other hand, had become a ghost on campus. He had quit the basketball team, his knee injury preventing him from ever playing at a competitive level again. With his family's company bankrupt and his father facing years in federal prison, the untouchable Ice Prince had been stripped of his wealth, his status, and his pride. He was often seen sitting alone in the far corners of the library, his eyes hollow, looking like a man who had survived a shipwreck only to realize he had nowhere left to go. One sunny afternoon in late April, Kevin and I were walking through the central plaza of the university. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, casting a soft pink shower over the stone pathways. Kevin stopped near a stone fountain, turning to face me. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, beautifully carved wooden box. "What's this?" I asked, my heart doing a light, hopeful flutter. "Open it," he said, his voice carrying a rare, nervous tremor. I opened the box. Resting on a bed of velvet was a delicate silver key. "I've accepted a position at a financial firm in Manhattan after graduation," Kevin said, his dark eyes locked onto mine, filled with an intense, unwavering sincerity. "I've signed a lease on an apartment near Central Park. I want you to have this key, Grace. It's your home, too, whenever you're ready." Tears of pure, unadulterated happiness welled in my eyes. I looked at the key, then up at the man who had stood in the freezing wind to find me, who had given me his coat, and who had shown me what it truly meant to be loved. "I'm ready," I whispered, stepping into his arms. As Kevin pulled me into a fierce, joyful embrace, spinning me slightly under the falling cherry blossoms, I saw a familiar figure standing near the edge of the plaza. It was Derek. He was holding a stack of textbooks, his face pale and drawn. He was watching us, his eyes filled with a profound, agonizing sorrow. He saw the way Kevin held me, not like a trophy, not like a convenient shadow, but like I was the most precious thing in his entire world. He saw the brilliant, radiant smile on my face, a smile he had never, in all our years together, been able to give me. Derek stood there for a long moment, a solitary figure trapped in the freezing winter of his own making. Then, slowly, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd, completely forgotten. I tightened my arms around Kevin's neck, burying my face in the warm crook of his shoulder as the spring breeze swept the last remnants of the winter snow away. I was finally warm, and I was finally home,